Okay, the camera light is on, so we're ready to start my second live stream here. Hopefully I worked everything out the first time. And as I said, I did have a topic I wanted to try for today called 7 Proposed Philippine Immigration Changes. 7 Proposed Philippine Immigration Changes. These are just my thoughts from being married to a Filipina and doing a lot more reading and watching the internet on Philippine relationships because before I married my wife, I really knew next to nothing about the Philippines, the dynamics with the Filipina. I just knew that I had heard they'd make great wives, and I certainly hadn't found one, and kind of losing hope I was going to. And I do think that at the end of the day, it was all designed to be that way on purpose so that I could meet my wife in 2015, and we got married on May 10th. So I see we have one person working, and I can see myself, so I think everything is fine. One person watching, so it looks like we're ready to get started here. This is Love Beyond the Sea. My name is Bob. Been married to a Filipina for about 3.5 years now, and I have these thoughts on proposed Philippine immigration changes. Immigration has been a hot topic in the news and resulting in much controversy. This has been due to how to handle illegal immigration. The topic of this video, though, is about legal immigration of a Filipina to another country, and I am here in the United States. Having worked with my wife through a spousal visa so she could come to America, and from being married to her since May 10th, 2015, I have formed some opinions on spousal visas for the most part from the Philippines, and I'm sure these will be controversial to some. I'm not even suggesting that they may be practical, but I do think that if they were to be done, it would help minimize, the chances of a bad relationship between a foreigner and a Filipina. So I'm not trying to criticize anyone who happened to use a fiance visa or who didn't necessarily go about it the way I'm going to describe. These are just my observations and thoughts. I'd like to think that if several adjustments were made, less broken relationships, more successes. And I'm going to refrain from commenting specifically about fiance visas because at least the woman has 90 days to change her mind, the man too, if she thinks she's getting into something she wasn't expecting, or vice versa. Perhaps this video can help someone who is not yet married a Filipina. You're welcome to leave comments about how I can get rid of this nasty cough I've had for 12 months, or anything regarding this topic here today, or really anything else. Depends on who happens to see this and how many comments. So certainly welcome to leave comments and subscribe if you're interested in learning about Filipina and foreigner relationships. And Phil's to Phoenix, ready to start the visa to the Philippines, and his wife for U.S. citizenship. We just started that. We're doing some tests a couple times. You can get online and ask all kinds of, trying to answer all kinds of questions about your country. We're not 100% sure yet that my wife is going to do that. But just in case, there's some things she needs to know. And we have Johnny Karate saying he wouldn't change anything about this process. Yeah, we had Molly Tibets, that's right here in neighboring Iowa. Just read about that a couple days ago. In fact, I talked to my wife about it. Got to do something, and I think whatever it takes to keep the process legal. This is about foreigners and Filipinas. Number one on my list, guaranteed to be popular with some, not with some others, is to meet the Filipina in the Philippines, and this would be a must, a requirement. Not everybody does this, but I think it's advantageous to make sure you meet her in the Philippines. And this is really two parts. One part is meeting the Filipina, and the other part is meeting her in the Philippines and learning about the Philippines as it is currently. Having spent time in the Philippines in the past, wouldn't count, even though this would have shown the man what part of the Philippines was like. It may have been a long time ago. It might have been in a different environment than where she lives now. For example, city compared to a province. I can't imagine what our marriage would be like if I had not gone to the Philippines and instead used a fiance visa, which was my first intention. I was thinking of how I could marry the soonest, since it had been, believe it or not, about 30 years since I had a relationship. I just wanted to get, married. Been waiting a long time. By doing this, I was not considering what might be best for the Filipina and what the cons of doing that would be. Maybe we could, get married earlier, but at what cost if I had not gained valuable knowledge of where she lived and how she lived. Value, I would experience the shock value of going to the Philippines. In my case, like I said, I knew little about the Philippines other than it was tropical, had beautiful women there with light or dark brown skin, tended to be short, and it was very far away, and they had the reputation for making good wives. I also heard that Filipinas, of course, like I said, just made great wives, and I knew it was far away, and I found out when I went there just how far away. Takes 4 flights, about a day and a half to get there from Nebraska. From the day I decided to join a Filipina dating site to the day we got married, the span was less than 8 weeks. Honestly, I had no idea of the level of poverty I was going to see, and it really blew me away. It was surreal being there. The traffic was astounding and dangerous. It's slow getting anywhere in the vehicles, and trying to cross traffic on foot. You're taking your life into your hands. My wife practically had to grab my hand and pull me across the street, because she was familiar with, how they darted around there, obviously better than I was. Ample pollution there in the Philippines. Later, I learned about the governmental corruption and that some people don't even trust the police. However, the aspect that affected me the most was the poor conditions. Having been a lifelong American in a middle-class home, I was definitely in for a shock. Now, after experiencing any shock, I would be able to observe her attitude towards life. Excuse me, in this environment. Was she angry? Did she seem content? I was pleasantly surprised. My wife was a strong woman, and I even have a video about that called My Filipino Wife is the Strong One. If I had not gone to the Philippines, this is something that I would not have known about her and been able to appreciate. And she is the same way here in the United States. Another value being experience something of the culture in the Philippines. Family, of course, is huge in the Philippines. And like many people out there on YouTube, I have a video about that called The Relative Importance of Family to Filipinas. For one thing, it's a pleasure to see how close the families are, but it's also important to realize that by proposing to her, you are asking her to go far away from them to another country, and neither the Filipina nor her family know when they will see her again. I'm constantly aware of my wife's love for her family. That's why I try not to limit how much time she spends on Facebook with them, and that is the topic of another video that I have in the making. I would also value would be going to the trouble, so to speak, of taking 2, 3, maybe 4 flights to meet her, depending on where she lives. A ferry ride might even be included. And there are the layovers, the potential delays. One time we made one trip, and I think it was 52 hours of layovers. It was just a bad weather, very, very long trip, but you just never know. Layovers, potential delays, these trips cost quite a bit of money, and there also may be the fear factor of flying if you have not flown before, not to mention to another country. So there is some trouble that you show that you're willing to go through, and there may be some unrest about going to the third world country, how safe you're going to be, if you're going to get out of there alive. You may have some stereotypes that aren't true about these countries, but it certainly can be a grind. There are examples of men who don't believe they're physically able to make such a trip to the Philippines, but there are examples of other men who still do it despite a variety of physical ailments, not to mention their age. I know of one man personally who lives very close to us who is, I can never remember, 78 or 82. He's very sharp, but deals with a lot of physical issues, but actually still manages to travel all over the world, including the Philippines, where he married a Filipina. I don't know how he does it, but he does. It's important to him, so he finds a way. Only each man knows if they can't manage to go to the Philippines, or they would just rather prefer not to go to the trouble, or if the cost is prohibitive. If the cost is prohibitive, then I don't know how they would be able to support a Filipina or to fly her here, allow her to go back home, and so on. Surely she's going to want to work when she gets here, but that doesn't happen instantly. That takes some time. So this accomplishes two additional things. One is it proves to myself the length I will go to marry her and meet her in the Philippines. And it shows the family that I'm willing to spend the time and money to meet their daughter and learn more about her. And being there in the Philippines, right where she grew up, is a good way to do that. If I don't want to go to the trouble to meet her, then I think it would be a challenge to be able to live with her. This leads me to my second proposed immigration requirement. Just, hypothetical, fictitious proposals here. Number two, must meet the Filipina's family in person. Must meet her family in person. I just don't think it's fair to not meet her family before marrying her. My belief has been that if either of the couple's parents don't approve, then they should move on. This was for couples in my own country, and I don't know why that would change with a Filipina and a foreigner. That's just how I've believed. This may be especially important if you are considering marrying a much younger woman. And by the way, I'd like to do another live stream on that topic. You will be potentially taking their daughter and perhaps main wage earner or potential main wage earner away from them. Of course, this needs to be made up in her absence somehow. Initially, that's going to be by the husband. They deserve the opportunity to check you out. It's only fair to evaluate if you are desired to be a part of their family. I mean, who knows? If I wouldn't marry someone in America without meeting her parents, then why should I do that in the Philippines when the costs are higher? For example, their loss of wages, not seeing their daughter. If someone wanted to marry my daughter, if I had one, I would sure like to talk to them about his responsibilities to her, kind of size him up. If a Filipina's father has something to say to me, then I want to hear what it is. And I want to calm any fears he has about how I will treat his daughter. I just think it is a sign of respect to meet them in person. I think it would mean a lot to them too. In over 3 years of marriage, my wife's family has met me 3 times. And I didn't have this cough when I met them the first time. And I can tell that they have slowly warmed up to me. A lot of that pace is likely due to not being comfortable, speaking English to me, but I can perceive they are more at ease with me, perhaps more trusting even. In that time, my wife, no doubt, has had the opportunity to tell them how I treat her, and this should make them more receptive to me over time. This most recent trip, many family members greeted us at the airport when we arrived at something like 3 a.m, and likewise when we departed about 3 a.m. This was the first time that had happened. Usually maybe 1 or 2 family members picking us up at the airport or taking us there. There were more tears this time. It would seem that by this time that maybe wouldn't be the case, but it shows that they are trusting that I have my wife's best interests at heart and that I love her family too. As her family has embraced me more, I have gotten closer to them as well. My wife chats with the babies, and I do too, so it is good to see them in person, even though they are afraid of me. we discovered. It could be my beard, my size, or that I am a foreigner, but we didn't really strike a, we didn't really, what's the term, hit it off when we went to the Philippines. Hopefully in the future, they'll be a little older and they'll take to me a little more. I pray for her family. I'm sure all of this would be different had I not met them the first time, even though it can be uncomfortable just going through the whole process of going there. I think meeting her family shows her family that you want to be included in their family and that you don't want to just take their daughter and sister away. I should add that when you meet her family, it's best to be confident that you are there to take good care of her daughter and that you can embrace the Filipino culture. Attempt to make conversation with them and seem interested in the places that they may take you to see. I think no doubt they'd be proud of where they live and want you to see some of the sites. Now, meeting her friends, that's a bonus, and it also can tell you something about your Filipino prospect. I have met some of my wife's friends each of the 3 times that I have been to the Philippines, and each time have been impressed with just how down to earth her friends were. They act polite, they dress decently, and they seem like very friendly, clean-cut women. At a wedding recently in the Philippines, just a few months ago, I met some of her friends and that she had still had from elementary school. I don't think I have any friends from that far back, and haven't for decades. So that kind of impressed me. Now, the third would be, now here, some of you may feel like I'm stepping on toes, but hear me out, must receive financial counseling. My concerns here is that the foreign man must be able to provide for his Filipino wife. I hear guys say that a trip to the Philippines costs too much. Well, then how are they going to support this woman, when they get her to their country? This money aspect is always important in a relationship. She could be much younger and might be able to work, but that's not going to happen right away. She'll need a social security number, must attempt to find an appropriate work opportunity. And I do have a video about my wife's work experience I'll release one of these days. We got her a job through a temporary agency, had to answer questions, tests, drug tests. And the reason she was able to work as quickly as she did was because we're working at the same company. And, if you know somebody, a relative, they kind of will let them work there before having to go through the process of finding somebody else. And by the way, she's doing a great job there. I believe a man should meet her and her family in the Philippines, which will cost a lot of money to do. We are in the Midwest, the United States. The lowest we have paid for a round-trip flight to Manila was about $1,500, $1,600 for each of us. That's $3,200 to get us both over there, and we still aren't in Davao. So there's another layover and another flight to get to Davao. My wife would know, but it's probably another $200, $300. And so we still have to do that. And, I only made one trip to the Philippines when I went to marry her, and that was to meet her, marry her while there. And if you go a few times, that really adds up. You're also going to need somewhere to stay. A younger man from work, 37, 38 years old now, I think, made several trips to Manila to meet the Filipina that became his wife, and she should be here next year. He was able to financially do this, and it meant enough to him to arrange his time off of work so he could still do it. He worked with my wife when she started working and asked her how we met, and she told him on Christian Filipina. He joined up in a couple months, it seems. He decided to focus on the woman he eventually married, and this concept of pursuing one at a time is the topic of another future live stream, I hope. There are costs for a spousal visa, green card, possibly citizenship that some of you have gone through. There's a medical exam in the Philippines, a handful of other charges related to a visa. I had a list, but those emails seem to have disappeared. Then there's a wedding ring, After waiting so long for a wife and marrying a younger Filipina, I made sure the ring would show her how valuable she was to me. She's from Davao and had no qualms wearing it in public, not the least bit concerned about theft because she believes it is a safe city. And a lot of people also echo that sentiment. A Filipina will want to send money back home for her family, and that is something a foreigner needs to accept from the start. That's the reason why she married a foreign man. Doesn't mean that she won't be a good wife, but she wants to give her family a better life to meet some of their basic needs. And she wants to be a great wife. She takes pride in the house and how she cooks and being a great wife. So, to be stingy with money, I think would be bad for the relationship. Until she has a job, she's going to want to update her wardrobe, buy some nice purses and accessories. What about vacations you'll take? She may want to see your country. Here in Nebraska, we have winter, so there's a whole new set of wardrobe a Filipina could wear, that just suits the season. Your wife's going to need health insurance. Life insurance would be nice. What about her going to dentist or eye exams? I think she has the right to have that provided to her. I'm not saying it's easy, especially if you're not working anymore. She's going thousands of miles away from her family to be a foreign man's wife. You don't have to be rich, but she should be able to be provided for. If I had to say off the top of my head, because I get asked this question once in a while, what marrying a Filipina would cost, I usually come up with something like $8,000 or so, pardon me, not counting a wedding ring. And that's more if you make multiple trips to see her. So I'm trying to say as the least it might be, maybe $8,000. That's just a figure. I don't know what you've heard, but that's what I would say. The foreigner will need to pay for her to get her out of the Philippines, and the flights are probably the largest expense in all of this. I did have to pay. I didn't have to. I chose to pay someone to handle our visa so that everything would go well and there wouldn't be any unnecessary delays. And that, I remember, cost me about $920. And everything went really well. He had some really good advice. There's some little things about that, like don't fold this, paper. This copy must be the original, not a photocopy, because some things you can make copies of. So that kind of scared me, and I thought I just want to pay for somebody to make sure that we do this right. The financial counseling part would be about making sure the foreigner knows exactly what costs are involved and can show exactly how he is going to pay for it all. Find out if he is able to, find out how excited he is about all of that. I don't think it's right for a man to marry a Filipina simply to expect her to take care of him, unless they have talked about this ahead of time and he is more than able to provide for her monetary needs for the rest of his life and well beyond. I saw a YouTube video one time about a Filipina moved to another country and was just shocked at the conditions she was living in when she moved to this new place. Apparently, they didn't talk much about that because she looked miserable. So, I don't think you can talk about financial things too much. Again, this is just off the top of my head, some ideas. I don't want there to be any financial surprises when a foreigner marries a Filipina. Somehow everything should be laid out exactly what they have to know. And thank you, Phil's to Phoenix. Airfare, little things, he thinks maybe 10,000 and up to citizenship. Citizenship, do you know what the cost for that is? I'm expecting, let me just guess, maybe $500, $600 for citizenship. Whatever that comes to be, I know for us that will be the very last expense of these expenses. It'd be nice to pay them off all at once, but it's probably good that you don't have to, so you can save that money and have it ready when you need to. So maybe $8,000 to $10,000 if want to include everything, not talking about visiting there 5 times, but if you want to get it done reasonably quick. All right, number 4, must receive marital counseling at a conference. Not just marital counseling like the kind you get when you marry in the Philippines. We got marital counseling there, and it didn't take very long. And fortunately, being an older guy who had been very interested in that sort of thing, I could relate completely to the pastor who was going to marry us, and I agreed with everything he told us. But a lot of times, that can go in one ear and out the other. Financial counseling is one thing. Then there is marital counseling. I'm not talking about just I don't know, a quick 30-minute recitation of some basic marital concepts. If it were possible, I'd like to see something like a marriage conference set up. If it were possible, where both the man and the Filipina are forced to really talk about things they might prefer to avoid talking about. We went to a conference shortly after my wife got here, and that was over a 2-day period, which is typical. And it really wasn't like where you sit each other down and you go over certain private things. I kind of wish it was, but it was more where we just take in what the speaker was saying. A trained counselor would instruct a couple on areas where it looks like they might have some major conflict, and also, of course, how to deal with it. This would need to take a couple of days. Well, maybe not. If it's just the 2 of them, then perhaps it could get done in 1 day, but it wouldn't be a quick thing. Just like these marriage conferences are done that I am familiar with. Citizenship fee is $725, including biometric free. Well, that sounds about right. So that's something we have to be prepared for if my wife decides to be a citizen. And I'm not even sure of all the pros and cons of that. And we can't do it right now anyway, but we can, I think, apply for it probably. It's nothing that we have to hurry through. So as far as this marital counseling, topics, you could cover in depth would be, for example, how to talk to each other, meeting each other's needs, the role of a husband and a wife, sex in marriage, differences between the sexes, what the major priorities should be, just anything that is necessary to help the couple get off to a great start in their marriage. Perhaps talk about the cultural differences and how this could affect your relationship. There's a marriage license that you acquire to get married, but people go into it with no idea how hard it's going to be and how to get along. It would be great to have a license to marry that shows you have been properly prepared for marriage. As long as I'm able to have a YouTube channel called Love Beyond the Sea, I want to discuss some of these very issues because I want to help put Filipinas and foreigners together. If you're about to give up on ever finding true love or marriage, you may have been boxed in by thinking that it had to be somebody in your own city, your own state, your own country. And it doesn't even need to have necessarily be the Philippines, but another country. You study up that country, do your research. You might want to give it another shot. I did with a Filipina and couldn't be happier. Number 5, must pass a written test to show that you have read and understood the dynamics of a foreigner marrying a Filipina. Kind of like, having a license and, signing that you know what you're getting into. And remember, this is all theoretical, and I'm making this video just to get responses and to make some points. It would be nice to have some kind of document for the man to keep, and also for the Filipina, maybe her family, to keep, because marriage is serious business. Marriage, of course, is hard enough work and could be compounded by marrying a Filipina from far away with a different culture, and she might be even quite a bit younger. Some of the inspiration for these fictitious ideas came across, and I was thinking about the television show 90-Day Visa. I've just seen parts of it on YouTube, where some of the relationships don't last very long and others seem like they are destined to fail. And so this video is designed to make you aware of problematic areas in a very long distance relationship like with the Filipina. I don't think these are going to be implemented anytime soon, but these are areas I can see, having been married to a Filipina now for about 3.5 years, that would be good to do. Just two more. Number 6, must ask for her father's permission to marry his daughter. I don't know how many of you have done that or how many of you are thinking about doing that, but this is what another suggestion I have. I think it's a good idea. In fact, I have a video about this called Asking My Filipina's Father for Permission to Marry Her. It's not an expectation, according to my wife, but even so, I wanted to do it anyway. I understood that I had the intention of effectively taking her father's daughter away from the family, far away. I thought it would make sense to ask him for his permission. To not involve him by formally asking him for his daughter's hand in marriage, I think would be a mistake and would not get the family relationship off to a good start. You're marrying into a new family. I would say this even if the woman was not a lot younger than me. If my wife's father had said he would not give me permission to marry his daughter, then I would not have married her. And I think this advice applies right here to America or anywhere else. Wouldn't you prefer that someone who has been seeing your daughter have the courage to ask you for permission to marry her? It would be a great time for you to ask questions and raise concerns. Actually, both of you, I guess. I did this with her whole family through Skype, so it doesn't need to be in person unless you can do that. I was going down there for the purpose of marrying her, so I figured we better do it ahead of time, so we did it on Skype, and the whole family was there. And I got his approval, then flew to the Philippines, and we got married. So that brings us to the last one, number 7, must marry her in the Philippines. Now, again, I'm not saying the fiance visa is the worst thing in the world. I'm just saying I can see more advantages to marrying her where she is, and let me explain this. A good idea for several reasons. The first is that it shows you can afford to fly there and that you can experience her homeland and her surroundings. The second is that the foreigner makes an effort to go to the Philippines. I had not flown much before I went to the Philippines, and when her mother asked me if I would be going back, I said no, because I was so hard on my back, and it took so long. I just didn't want to repeat that process again. But having said that, and having gone back twice more, I think it's been easier each time we've gone back. The third reason is to give her family the opportunity to be at the wedding and make it a big celebration. And for them to miss out on that, I just didn't feel right about it. I think it's best, if they were able to be there at the wedding and invite family and friends and make a big celebration of it. Returning to point 1 about experiencing her homeland surroundings, I actually considered a fiance visa initially, and that was to be able to be with her as soon as possible and to have my pastor marry us here in the States. This pastor can be seen in one of my videos where we're talking about his help and me finding a wife. And then that idea got nixed because my wife wanted me to marry her in the Philippines, so I did. Very, very glad I did. Her suggestions are usually the very best. I got to meet her friends, family members, of course, and perhaps more importantly, they got to meet me. I might have been a little shy, a little bit uncomfortable being in there. Kind of a surreal experience, but maybe they kind of expected that too. They got to see me try to learn some Filipino words. We ate dinner with them quite a bit. They got to see us interact and see how I would, playfully interact with my wife affectionately. And I wouldn't have missed that opportunity for the world. Phil's to Phoenix, we had 3 different ceremonies. Wow. The first at her parents' house, and then a quick one for paperwork here, and finally a public one for friends and family here. And yeah, that's a good idea. We've talked in the past about having a ceremony here so people could could see us. We have such a small family, just pretty much my mom and my aunt and my cousin. But there's people at work, I mean, at church, that prayed for us to get married, and maybe it's something we'll still do. And I appreciate that, Phil's to Phoenix, because maybe we should have another ceremony here. Get my pastor involved. It's now back in the back of my mind, and thank you for making that comment. Marrying in the Philippines gave me about a month to experience the heat and realize how different her country is than mine. Some of the poverty I saw was a real eye-opener, and I had no idea. The experience again, I was in awe of that. Had I married here in the States and never set foot in the Philippines, I would have robbed myself of being able to see what it was like, the good, the bad, the ugly. I also would have missed seeing how easygoing many of the people there are. I would have missed watching my wife work so hard and so long on all of the details of the wedding. Pardon me. And that was just a precursor to how my wife handles her job, how she operates here around the house. Very organized, very hardworking. People look up to her. She was impressive then, and she's very impressive now. I see some leadership qualities in her that I saw there, and I try to encourage that for her here in the States. So to wrap this up, here are the 7 proposed Philippine immigration changes I'd make if I were Rodrigo Duterte. Must meet the Filipina in the Philippines, must meet the Filipina's family in person, must receive some kind of extensive financial counseling, must receive marital counseling at some kind of a conference where it's more in depth, and must pass the written test to show you have read and understood the dynamics of a foreigner marrying a Filipina, must ask for her father's permission to marry his daughter, and must marry her in the Philippines. Now keep in mind, we got married in less than 8 weeks from the time I winked at her beyond the sea. I didn't process through all of these 7 proposed changes myself. They come to mind when thinking about what could be done that would make a foreigner marrying Filipina a more likely success. Something to at least improve the chances of success by realizing what is going to prove to be important early on and down the road. So please leave comments even long after this live stream. Let me know if you've thought of any other things that could be done to improve the chances of success for a foreigner and a Filipina. That's what this channel is all about, how to improve your chance of finding love beyond the sea. And this is my second live stream. I did one, well, the one I did recently was just kind of a, channel update. And this is about to help a foreigner have a better chance with Filipina. Yeah, it can be a little bit of a burden, going over there, but even if you're not in the greatest of condition, still everything applies. All the value of going there, it means a lot to her family. And you may not have to go again a second time. I think that would be okay as long as she gets to go there and you make the effort to go there and meet everybody, her family, friends, eat with them, go to the mall, just see what it's like. And, then you may not have to go again. I'm only 56 and a half, and we've gone 3 times. We'll probably go next year. And, I wouldn't mind if we went at least every other year, because I've learned how to handle those flights, so they're not so bad. And so that's just this idea. I hadn't seen anything about it on YouTube before, kind of related to this, and it's all part of foreigners, Filipinas having a good relationship, because if you find a good one, you can still have some years or decades of happiness in marriage, just like I did. You see this basement down here where we spend most of our time. It looks a little different than a few days ago because my wife rearranged this just a while ago, but it's very neat, clean, organized, I hate clutter, and apparently my wife does too. If I showed you our storage room, that looks very nice. It's very organized, and well, I don't want you to give up. If you're thinking you have no more chance at love, I didn't see any way out. Please watch my channel, learn from it. If you don't want to marry a Filipina, you want to believe, that it's not going to work out, that's certainly okay. It's a big step. There's some risk to it. There's no question about it. And so you need all the help you can get to recognize scams. And in this case, what I focus on, since I'm married, is how to earn her respect. Trust is something I'll be doing a video about. The age difference, all kinds of topics. I could go over them right now, but can I tell how long this has been going on? 40 minutes and 52 seconds. I'd love to talk and respond to any comments if anybody has some. Otherwise, we will call it a live stream for today. And I wish I could have given some, warning, not warning, just that here we're going to do a web stream or a live stream later, but I don't know how. I guess to do a post, you have to have 10,000 subscribers, and you can just put a message out there to your subscribers telling them that you've got a video coming up. And I didn't want to make a video just for that. So, you'll be able to see this anyway. Eventually, you can certainly leave comments there and subscribe if you're interested in more from Love Beyond the Sea. So that's it for now. I appreciate everybody that was able to watch it, leave a comment, and that's able to watch it later on.